It's always a very special part of the afternoon where we actually get to meet patients and hear about their own journeys. It's typically one of the most highly rated panels because we're actually hearing from patients who have had the treatments we've been talking about and looking at this morning and this afternoon. And I think we're lucky to have 5 people who have so generously offered to be on this panel. And I think if you look in your program, you'll see that there are some net bios for each person. We're very happy to have Pam Wagner, Pam. And Pam's bio is already in the program because she works with the San Diego Orange County NET support group. And so if you're looking for her bio, it's in the program. So I think we'll start by just doing a brief introduction of yourself. And the information we asked before was your year of diagnosis, your primary location of primary tumor, and also where you live. So why don't we start with Tom right here.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I live right down the street, actually, in Westwood. And I was diagnosed at the beginning of 2015 with pancreatic NET. And yeah, actually, if you were here for the tumor board discussion, the second case, the one that was labeled TB, that was actually me. So you now know everything about my medical history, except I didn't go to Germany.
So I'll just preface this next patient's introduction by saying I got an email one day, and it was from this man who told me about his own neuroendocrine diagnosis, and then he said, but my daughter is a patient, and she doesn't know I'm writing this, but we would like to introduce ourselves to you. So here is Layla Voss.
Thank you. Yes, my dad wrote a very touching letter, I felt encouraged reading it, and he has come to other conferences, and I'm really excited that I'm able to be here today because I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling normal energy again. A couple of years ago, I would not have been able to travel and be here. And again, my name is Layla, and I'm from Oceanside in the San Diego area, North County. And I was diagnosed with pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer that had metastasized to, the liver, the lymph nodes, some spots in my bones. It was pretty advanced by the time they found it. I was diagnosed in April of 2016, so I'm going on about 2 years. I was really sick and symptomatic, carcinoid syndrome, had to be in the hospital for a week, very weak. And I have responded so well to the treatments. It just feels really good to be able to live my life and to be able to be here today. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Van Bibber. I am the president of the San Diego Neuroendocrine Tumor Support Group. I've been able to be there since 2014. And my journey started, though, in 2010. And I was there 7 years ago, sitting in your seat, and after I found out I was diagnosed with this cancer. And so it's been an amazing journey of trying to figure out, of course, from the initial diagnosis to surgeries to several microablations to PRT, CAPTEM. I've had a whole slew during the last 7 years, but yeah, it's been a great journey, and I'm honored to be here to speak with you guys today. So,
Hello, my name is Pam Wagner, and I also belong to the San Diego OC support group. I'm from Murrieta, and I was diagnosed in September of 2016. My primary is in my lung, and at that time it had spread 2 spots on my bone and my liver. I'm very honored to be here. I like to especially talk to the newly diagnosed to give them hope. And this is just such a wonderful conference. Last year was my first one, and I'm really, really glad to be here, so thank you.
Most of you know I'm Beth DeBlase, and I was diagnosed in March 2016. My primary was in my ileum, so small intestines, and metastases in liver, lymph node, and I think that's it. So that was in May of 2016.
So the PNETs all happen to sit together in this subliminal. A few of you are fairly newly diagnosed. And so I want to put this question out there first to Layla and Beth and Pam. In the short time since you've been diagnosed, what would you say has been the biggest impact on your life? And what are the changes you've experienced, just because this is very fresh for you?
Well, I really had a big impact on what I was able to do in the early stages. Just felt very sick and symptomatic, looked horrible. It was really hard on my vanity. I felt horrible. And I was used to being a really busy, healthy person, and a busy mom of 2 teenagers. And so, really slowed me down. I was really encouraged when I was very sick and my dad came home from a conference and said, yes, there's no known cure, but listen to this testimonial from the LACNET conference that says, I'm not cured, but I'm well. And so I had a lot of hope of feeling well again. And so there was a big change to my schedule, but now I really appreciate being able to do the purposeful things that I set out to do. I just don't take it for granted. I feel like, it sounds a little cliche, but my priorities have become really clear to me, and I feel like it's easier to live really purposefully and appreciate it.
I would have to agree. September 2016, when I was diagnosed, I was a super mom, working lots of hours and, racing through life. And you find out now that it's not a race. And I'm able to do things that I never got to do before. And those things are positive, like the times that you spend with your family and your friends. You used to be too busy to do that. Also, positive experiences. It's real important to do those things and do things that you didn't do before. So yes, you look at life differently, and I enjoy not working now and taking advantage of all my friends, my family, great experiences, and living, with peace and breathing. And so just remember that even if you're not diagnosed, we're never promised a tomorrow. And so I would like to talk to Steve, the comedian, but I do live my life as though it's, could be my last, because I know that I could be in a car accident tomorrow on South 15 and it won't be the cancer that might kill me. So do enjoy every day.
For me, the biggest impact was very similar to Layla's. It was very active and had young children teenagers still at home, and some going to college. And then I was thinking, I'm done. I get to now, this is my time, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm so excited. And then that just all of a sudden, was gone. That life was gone. And then having to explain to my children and my family that Beth is Beth's gone too. So this is now the new version of me. And it, you know, and it's just the evolved version of me. And so that was hard to, for me to accept myself, and then for my family to accept too. And it's very hard, I think, as a NETS patient when you look like Layla, and you look like David, and you look like Tom, and you look like Pam, and you look like me, and everybody's like, well, you look great, so how are you sick? So that's been one of the biggest challenges that I have faced since diagnosis, because, you know, I might look this way, but I've got scars on my body that say otherwise. And so, you know, and bumps on my, you know, lumps on my butt, and lumps, you know, and I'm just like, how many, I'm going to get a bunch of those, you know, and so, you know, those changes were the biggest changes, and but then, you know, I'm not alone in that, and so that makes the biggest difference, is that I'm not alone in it.
Yeah, I think if somebody walked in here accidentally, they would not think that all of us, you know, were cancer patients to begin with, and not stage 4, and you know, so that's one of the struggles, actually. So for the people, say David and Tom, who were diagnosed a little bit further back, how does that work for you in your life? Because people, I think a lot of times with me, if I say I was diagnosed in 2005, they think I'm finished, you know, like as in, but that's done, right? That was 2007 or whenever. So how do you manage that, and in answering that question, do people think that you're in remission? We hear the remission word a lot. David?
Yeah, for me, been almost coming up in 8 years. I think the hardest thing for me was at work. I was very open in the beginning, very compassionate, kind coworkers, but as time progressed, I started to get a lot of that, well, you gotta do another surgery? Oh, you still have cancer? And it was sad that because we don't look like what they see on TV, we don't look like their great aunt that had a sprint cancer, we have a marathon cancer, and that's hard to translate to people. They have no concept of, yeah, it's chronic terminal, I'm going to always be dealing with this, but you know, it's manageable, and this is, you know, I'm trying to. So yeah, it's a hard line to tread, but I still, you know, with that being open for myself, I can only speak for myself, is that it's been a great opportunity to share my cancer journey and provide hope to my friends and families, because I'm just vulnerable, and I've been battle hardened with 7 years, thankfully, to know that people are going to say things, especially in front of my children, that I do not want them to say, you know, or, you know, like, you know, that are very hard, but those are opportunities. I've been taking them as training opportunities with my kids or with my friends and my family to educate them and to bring awareness to it. So that's the road that I've chose, even though it's been some hard lines and with difficult conversations, but I found it fruitful myself. But.
So many of you have mentioned children, and as parents, how are you able to talk to your kids? And I'm sure that changes depending on their ages, and if it's been 7 years, then they've grown as well. I would imagine, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that's one of the most difficult parts of explaining what's going on, and trying to give a good sense of reality, but at the same time let them know that this is going to be more of the marathon. Anyone want to jump in there?
I'll respond to that, because I just spoke to Lisa about this today, about my children, and I did the health coaching with Lisa, and which was amazing and a profound experience for me that really helped me grow, helped me focus, helped me ground, and because I tend to have a lot of things going on in my mind. And so with so many, as you heard in my talk earlier, with so many trials, in a sense, coming up in my life, they're also coming up in my children's lives. And so one of the things I discussed with Lisa was about breaking the cycle of trauma, of intergenerational trauma, and how to not leave that with my children, since this is something it will be long-term in a sense, you know, and how to teach them to live their lives and to thrive on their own. You know, my son is 22. He was 20 at the time. My daughter was 14. And my son stayed at the hospital every night when I was in there with my husband and helped take care of me. But they struggled. The first year they struggled, and I struggled. And I could tell they were struggling. But as I began to thrive and I began to focus and turn this new chapter, this new journey, into something that inspires me, and then I can see them starting to thrive on their own and becoming better people for it, of their own. Not for me, but for themselves. So I think by example, like David said, by example, by educating them, and by just being the, you know, showing them that I'm going to live with it so you can live with it.
How about you? Oh, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, you know, when I was diagnosed, my son was 2, daughter was 4, daughter was 6. So, you know, the early stages, you know, daddy's got a tummy ache, and, you know, it was easy, but I think the hardest thing, because I've had time, is to try to be intentional with them, and I've tapped into a couple sources, cancer.net, and they shipped me pillows, and so we colored those, and we were able to talk through it. I've gotten some books, but I have found out just even this last year, we kind of let my son, who's now 9, you know, he asked my wife during the night, you know, is daddy going to die? And that was a reality that I not forgot him, but I didn't bring him up to speed as I should have, and that was a fail on my part. But all those opportunities have been rich and rewarding. He was also able to, with AAA and the Carcinoid Foundation, receive one of those bikes. So there's been benefits as well as very difficult times, but it's been rich and rewarding to discuss that with him. So there's been a lot of opportunities because I've had time. So
I'd imagine that, you know, having the real conversation from a kid's perspective, they appreciate that they have a sort of a gut sense of what's real, and you're having conversations you probably wouldn't have otherwise. Yeah.
And like Beth said, they really do feed off us. They really do gauge themselves by, you know, if I have joy, or if they can tell, you know, we've lost hope, you know, they really can sense a lot. And so that's why I try to be intentional to speak with them, because they can gauge us really well. I mean, as most people have had kids know that from a daily perspective, more or less from cancer. So.
Kind of like we do with our doctors when they walk in the room, you're looking for those signs. Do they look hopeful or not? Or the flight attendant on a flight, are we going down, or are we okay? Layla?
And I, you know, was just thinking about how did this affect my kids, or what did I learn from that too. And I think since, you know, I had so much great family support, you know, from friends and family, hearing about treatments, I felt really optimistic. And so I always talked about that with my kids. But I think I learned that, you know, both my kids are different, and I saw that, you know, some kids have a harder time identifying and verbalizing their feelings, you know, especially, you know, at certain maturity levels, or when they're a little younger. And so one of mine, you know, I noticed it wasn't easy for her to identify how she felt, and she would say, I'm fine, you know, oh yeah, I'm fine, you know, when people would ask. And so I really learned, you know, I saw over time that the change in schedule and the change in me was truly hard for her, more than she was able to express. So just looking for, you know, different outlets and people, you know, that she could relate to and talk to. You know, it helped her to talk to a friend of hers whose mother also had a different kind of cancer. But just, you know, I didn't realize the impact on her at first because she couldn't say, you know, and so just looking for those outlets, even if your children don't have the ability to really articulate their feeling yet.
Mm-hmm. And Pam, did you want to extend on that, or?
My situation was I lived in Spokane, Washington all my life up until 5 years ago. I didn't know anybody down here when I moved down here. And so when I was diagnosed in September 2016, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. My dad's 91, my mom is 80. I have lots of uncles and aunts and cousins, and I just knew that it wasn't something that I was going to tell them over the phone. And so I had to make the decision right away. I went into a fighting mode to learn as much as I could about this disease. And I wanted that primary out. I wanted to be on Afinitor. And so it was my personal choice to not tell my family until I could tell them in person of May of 2017. And people, you know, I had friends that thought that I should have done it. Then they told me to tell them all in a group. But I always feel that you know your family and friends best. And so that's the way that I did it. And because I knew that when they hear cancer, they're going to think the worst in 90 days and that type of thing, and I would lose them on the phone. So I went up in May. I chose to meet with each of my family members individually because each of them react differently. But I did ask them if I could just talk to them and let me get through the whole story first, because then I was able to talk about if there is a good cancer, it's the cancer that we have, because it's slow moving, so it made them feel better and understand the cancer better. And I did ask them, I said, I hope you're not mad at me because I didn't tell you, and they all said that I did the right thing. So I just think that each of you just be true to yourself and what works in the way you tell friends and family.
I think that's so true. So if we remember how we felt when we first got the diagnosis, you hear the word cancer and automatically think the worst and think something like that 90-day scenario. And then it's the learning about neuroendocrine cancer and realizing, okay, well, maybe that's not my scenario, and realizing that there is time. But trying to explain that to other people, because that's not the 2-second explanation. So it's almost like all the education we've gone through to get to the point of understanding, no, it's not going to be the short-term thing. How do we do that with people at work? How do we do that with friends? Because it's more like, well, how long do you have? You know, letting them know you have cancer is not a 2-minute discussion. And I think for especially with people at work and in our community, it really takes someone who's willing to listen. It can't be someone who's just kind of asking you in the hallway, you know, passing. And Tom and I had a little email exchange about this, because one of the questions I asked people to think about, which I had gone through myself when I've always been a freelance musician. So in terms of work, the question was, I better not tell people, because if they know, they're not going to hire me, and that will be the end of my work. So I was very careful in the beginning, and then that shifted over time because I realized that I wanted people to know, and the more they knew, the more that they could understand it, and hopefully it would get on the radar. So Tom, maybe you can comment on that. We went through this, you know, when people say to you, how are you? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, the answer briefly is it's complicated, and that sometimes literally is what I say. But it depends, of course, on the person and the context. Nowadays, how are you is sort of an American way of saying hi. You know, it's not, you're not really expected to answer that. And you know, so if I'm in the elevator with a colleague and they say, hey, how are you today? I just say, good, you know, whatever. But sometimes, you know, people really want to know, and there's so many different ways to answer. Some people really do want to know the medical information. You know, they want to know how's your last scan look, and what are the treatment plans. Other people really are inquiring more about my state of mind. And so, you have to know the person and know the context to be able to answer it in one of those ways. But in general, I think early on in the process, I probably gave too much information. Part of it, I think, was just me trying to just bring everybody up to speed. And over time, I realized that not everyone wants to have all the information. So now I have my response typically is it's complicated, but I usually follow that with something like, but if I don't mind sharing more details if you would like, or maybe but maybe now's not the time. Do you want to have lunch next week or something like that? Depends on how much I really do want the other person to know. And I know that sounds like a very complicated way of saying it's complicated, but I want to be true to myself. And there's times when I'll say, honestly, pretty crappy, because I want to tell the truth. But I also want to be sensitive to what the other person really means when they say, how are you?
That's so true. It's understanding, on top of the responsibility of being a patient, we then have that responsibility of trying to monitor how the person asking, how much they really want to know. And I remember talking to somebody at a social gathering, and she saw me and said, "Oh my God, you're still alive." And I'm like, that is not a good response. And I think you mentioned something, Tom, that I think is also really important of, even with our loved ones, we may monitor how much we want to share because we care about them and we don't want them to worry. So this was something that came up. We talked with Michael States, who was leading the caregiver connection today and coping strategies. And her experience, one of the things she brought up from leading so many caregiver groups is that a lot of times the caregivers have things to express that they don't want to express in front of their loved one, because they may really feel like, well, I'm scared. I don't know how is this going to go? But they don't want to say that to the person, the patient. And likewise, as patients, we may not want to share some of those true fears. So I think that opens the way for some really, really genuine conversations about life together, what we think about the future, and living with uncertainty, which, Steve this morning said, yeah, we're all terminal. But with our heightened sense of that and understanding how things can change, how are some of the ways that you have changed your conversations, or what do you hold back, or how do you broach those topics? And have the caregivers in your life also expressed, been able to really say, I'm worried. Like you said, David, with your son, that he wanted to say that to your wife, but how do you have that conversation with young and old, the people in our lives? Layla, you look like you have a thought you want to share?
I feel really optimistic because I like how you said this is like a marathon. But I know that definitely my perspective has changed in making me want to make sure I do the things that are really important to me, like spend time with family, do the things I've always wanted to do. I just went on a trip with my family and my parents, and both my grown kids were there, to Costa Rica. And someone said, do you want to wait until after you've done such and such treatment and, you're walking around a little better? I have some hip problems that I'll maybe tell you about if it comes up. But And I said, no, I want to go now, and I don't even care if I have to go around in a wheelchair. I just want that time, with my kids and family. I want to do meaningful things, and I anticipate being able to do them for a long time, but, I realize that, there aren't guarantees, so that, just gives me more of a sense of purpose and wanting to build those memories.
Yeah, and Beth, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the things you've done since being diagnosed, because your work as an esthetician and then becoming involved with oncology aesthetics, and giving back and working with the program at City of Hope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been in the beauty industry for 20 years. That's what I do for a living. I'm a cosmetologist. And so it's not a job for me. It's a passion. I love it. I've always loved it. And because skincare is much like, in a sense, like the medical community. It's always evolving. It's always changing. There's tons of things to learn. There's always something new happening, and new products and treatments and new developments. And I love it. So I stopped doing it when my sister became ill, and to help take care of her. And plus, I didn't want to be around people. Which is not like me, because normally I like being around people. Connection is a huge part of who I am. And after my diagnosis and the passing of my father, I decided to look into research, and so I went back and got additional training so that I could be certified in oncology aesthetics. And so then I, of course, am a patient at City of Hope Hospital, and I developed a program there where I am there once a month doing aesthetic oncology on patients at City of Hope. So
Beth, I have a note to keep your microphone closer so people can.
Oh, sorry. So I see, so it's not just, I don't meet patients who just have my cancer. In fact, I've never met anyone yet who has mine. And I've met women who have had breast cancer, lymphoma, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, ovarian cancer, and what I've said to some other women that I've met tonight about cancer is that you can know that someone has the same, you can know that thousands of people have the same kind of cancer that you have, but it's still isolating. You still feel somewhat alone in that journey. And when you are able to actually physically connect with that person and say, I'm a patient too, even though, and then be able to share commonalities instead of the cancers, what makes us different, it's what makes us the same. And it's a privilege to work on those women. And one of my friends commented to me, and I will share this with you because I think it's important. She says, you're doing really good things. And I'm like, I go to City of Hope every 28 days for my injections and my treatments, and then I go to City of Hope every month to volunteer. And I feel that I'm more cured when I'm going for that volunteering than I do for that treatment. So I think that's important.
And anyone else? I'm just speaking about uncertainty and making future plans.
And I could talk about, as a sole breadwinner in my family, I think Teresa Wittenberg, when she came down, she asked a great question. She said, when do you feel the most vulnerable? And for me, as the main source of finances, it was when I am unsure if I can pay that bill or what the future is going to look like with 3 kids at home and the like. So there's been a lot of tough conversations with my wife, but one of the things when I found, even though they're scary and they're tough conversations, when I can provide surety to her, in other words, getting our trust in order, helping her to understand, all the financial ends and the death benefits and all those good things that, to say you're going to be fine if God were to take me home today. But, so that's the same thing I try to provide even to my support group members, to people in my church, family, friends, is that hope. It just assure them, that and that joy that I can hopefully relay to them, that although this is a difficult, long cancer, it is still can provide so many opportunities of joy and hope, and that assurity really does, I think Tom was saying, really help people that genuinely care, So I know that's going to be mine with my wife. Lots of tears, but good times, good opportunities.
Thank you, David. I think between all of us up here, we've had maybe all of the treatments that we talked about today. Some have had multiple. Tom, in your case, we definitely saw that you had quite a few. And I think 3 of us have had PRRT in different areas. Tom in Houston, Germany. So is there anything you might want to add about the experience of going through making these treatment decisions? And I think that's one of the most complicated things for patients right now, especially at the beginning, or, there's different phases. I think that, you might have a treatment in the beginning, maybe surgery, if that's possible. And then there's a question mark of what to do next. And we could see on the tumor board, it's a question, and it's not a universal answer. So how do you go about making those decisions with your oncologist and with your medical team, and deciding to go for it, whatever that decision is? I mean, Tom, you've had quite a few decision points, so.
Yeah, it's been a long path. It's been 3 years, but I feel like it's been 30. At first it was all about surgery. It was a really critical situation, and the decision was where to have the surgery. And we ended up choosing to have the surgery at UCLA. Big part of the reason there was the proximity. But then things got a little murkier after that as the disease progressed. And Lisa, my wife, and I, we at some point we used to have these sort of like little meetings, strategic meetings at our dining room table, and we talked about what are going to be the kind of guiding principles behind all our decision making. Sort of like what are our core principles, and one of the things was how risk averse are we? It's like almost like a financial seminar here, but it's like, if there's nothing wrong with being risky or with avoiding risk. Those are just 2 different kinds of personalities, and just to some degree, it's my personality to take on risk. Has something to do with being an entrepreneur or something. But so we knew that we wanted information, and every time you try to get information, there's always some inherent risk in that. Every medical test has some risk associated with it. But we said, well, aside from the NET, I'm healthy and fairly young, and I don't mind the risk. So we erred on the side of more information whenever possible. So I think that taking a step back and saying it's not just about each decision, it's sort of like, well, what are our principles that we're going to operate from as we proceed through many decisions?
I would say one thing I've learned is you got to be your own health advocate. You need to be the captain of your own ship, and that was relayed to me, and I'm so glad I learned that from another predecessor of mine. But use these physicians as your navigators. They're the people that are going to help you chart through those turbulent seas. But one of the things I've seen too, and it got mentioned earlier during the tumor board, the Q&A time, is that a lot of people get past those rough waters and then get to good seas, but they're not educating themselves. They're not planning their next move. As a NET patient, you should always at least have a direction or a reality and know who your go-tos are, with peers in your support group or with, those NET specialists that can really help you in a multidisciplinary team to know, hey, I'm back to rough waters. What do you think I should go? I mean, I use Josh and Giovanna often. Hey guys, you're just 1-2 steps ahead of me. What do you guys think? This is what I'm feeling. What do you think? So it's that whole thing of constantly educating, being prepared, and knowing the people you trust, your physicians, other peers, other support, that you are quality and can give you the wisdom that you need to make that great decision to go in.
Yeah, Pam?
I'm the CEO of my life. Really it's going to be what I can do, and we have to be active patients. And so it was important for me to put people around me that had the same values and were fighting for me just like I was fighting for myself. And so I was blessed to find an oncologist. He's not a NET specialist. I'm from Murrieta, but what I like about him is he is humble enough to say, let's hook you up with a NET specialist. And he wanted me to see Dr. Lee. I don't know if Dr. Lee's here from the City of Hope still, but awesome. I'm blessed to have him on my team. I have a great pulmonary doctor, cardiologist. They're all fighting just as hard as I am. And then also, like the support group with David and my leaders over here from our group, they're in the same boat. They want to help. So being a CEO, getting resources, getting a great group around you that's going to fight just as hard as yourself.
Yeah, because it definitely takes support. So I got the 5-minute warning about 2 minutes ago. Quickly, I want to wrap up and ask each of you, what are some of the coping strategies you use outside of our medical treatment decisions? And if there's anything you might want to share with the newly diagnosed here. We'll get about a minute each. We'll start with Beth.
I've got a lot of coping skills. I've
Tell us
all of
60
them out.
seconds.
Yeah. Because I had when you have a lot of things to cope with, you need to find, not everything, not all the things that you have to cope with. One thing will work for this, and one thing will work for that, and this will work for that. So you're having to deal with multiple things. You're not only having to deal with the side effects of your treatment and how it's affecting your body. You're having to deal with how it affects your mind, and then your emotions, and then the emotions of the people who love you and who are around you and who support you. Who's going to be there, and who's not going to be there. And then you have to cope with the fact that you've lost who you were. So you grieve in a sense for that person that you worked so hard to become, and now that's gone. Now you're going to work even harder to become this more evolved person. So, and when you kind of thought it was all over. So I've done additional education, volunteering, the fundraising, obviously, but I've also been myofascial massage. Because obviously your body's hurt constantly. I like to stay active, and so the sacrifice we make to be active is that we're going to feel pain, but we push through that and then take care of ourselves. So I try to balance what I can do and what I want to do with what I can treat afterwards. And then I've also done things with energy work, and I've done things with therapy and talking, because like we were talking about with children and family, I have an identical twin sister, and she does not like me to talk about my cancer at all. She doesn't want to know if I've had uptake or if I have reoccurrence, because in her mind, nothing's going to happen except good stuff. So she doesn't want to know. So I need a place that I can go that's safe and share. And so therapy is really important, to have a place where you can be completely authentic, completely yourself, and vulnerable. You have to have that. So
Great,
that
thank you,
heal.
Beth.
Yeah.
Pam?
I had a table over there. You can come see my coping skills for the newly diagnosed. My happy planner,
It's
coloring.
not the candy.
Oh, I'm
It's
the
not
candy.
coping skills.
I always say hugs, so there's hugs and kisses over there too. But I want to talk about this. Can everybody raise their hand that are caregivers? I'm telling you, my caregiver over here, Roberto, I could not do it without him. You're very, very, very important people. Again, I didn't tell my family, and so he was the only one that knew. And I wrote a letter in case something happened in my surgery, but my coping is because of his strength and somebody that I can talk to and gets me through the day and kicks me in the butt if I'm pushing myself too hard. So my coping skills, you're all very, very important because you didn't ask to be in this job and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you. Thank you, Roberto.
For me, I take a holistic approach. So it's the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, mental. So yeah, I'm very intentional. Try to be self-disciplined with all activities of my life. You know, I intentionally schedule with that wise older person, or with my support group, or spiritually with my church, you know, leading groups. I love to give. I know that really propels me when I can lead the support group, or you know, lead a Bible study, or whatever. Those type of things just energize me. That's the way I'm geared. So yeah, physical, wake up in the morning, I do stretches, you know, walk the dog right now just because my energy is low, but then when it gets back up, a lot more active. So it can change throughout the time, but I try to keep to a holistic and try to focus on all of them, because it's very, very easy for us to lose just one component and the system can just get thrown out. So I'm very intentional, I guess, with my holistic approach.
And I love how you talked about the caregiver, because I feel like as the person who is going through this, you know, it's such a blessing to have so much support. And I feel like sometimes I'm given all this credit too, you know, oh, you're being so strong, you know, and really, I do really feel that way too, that I couldn't do this without, you know, the constant support of my family, and especially my husband, Mike. You know, just great support helps a lot. And coping skills, I would say for me, it's a balance between resting when I need to rest, kind of giving myself permission to slow down my schedule a little bit sometimes, which is hard for me to do, and a combination of taking on meaningful challenges that that excite me about the future. So I was able to go back to school, and I'm about to finish my master's. You know, for a while I was too sick to be in school. But just continuing to take on challenges that are meaningful to me, but also resting, and then, you know, just connecting with the support of people that love me, that, you know, are positive, and a lot of support from, you know, my faith and my friends from church also. So those are the things I think that help me cope.
I think that those are all great things. I have not very much to add to them. My wife, Lisa, has been an amazing caregiver. I am not exaggerating to say that I don't know if I would be alive today without her support. And we are also very blessed to be part of a very vibrant and loving church family that provides for our emotional as well as many of our physical needs. But the only thing I would add that it's just a little thing is just that for me, I feel a need to create beauty, and for me that takes the form of writing music and poetry, and and I now have a garden, which is something I always wanted to do. I don't know why I didn't do it. Well, I do know why I didn't do it. I didn't have time. But now I have time, so I have a garden, and I get my hands dirty, and I pick vegetables, which Lisa cooks into wonderful meals.
Mhm. Well, thank you, everyone, for this great insight, and you all exude positivity and optimism, and I really appreciate you sharing your stories. Thank you.